Hi everybody, I recently saw these 3 movies in theaters and I want to quickly talk about each one. There are time codes in the description and non-spoiler and spoiler sections for each film, so let's get started. The first film I saw was Strange Darling. A lot of people were talking about this film's kind of obnoxious marketing, about it being shot and intended to be only seen in 35mm, but obviously there were very limited places in the US that could actually be able to screen it in 35mm, so it was just really annoying for most people. It's kind of like when Gemini Man came out and the director shot it in 120 FPS, 4K, and 3D, but not a single theater in the US could even screen that format. I had a different experience with Strange Darling though, since I didn't know about this whole marketing thing, and I happened to see it in one of the few theaters that was actually screening it in 35mm, so I thought those messages at the start were just the theater being obnoxious, but apparently everybody had to sit through that. To stay on topic, I'll start by talking about the cinematography. It's a great looking movie. I'm not a purist for shooting on film, but it just has a glow to it that's really pretty to me, and I thought it really complemented the film well. There's one scene that's shot entirely with blue lighting, and I was thinking about how cheap that would look if it were shot digitally, but with film it looks awesome. This is the cinematographer's first feature, and I guess he's mostly an actor, but this film shows a lot of promise. The acting was great from both leads. I don't recognize Willa Fitzgerald from anything, but she was really fantastic. Kyle Gallner elevates pretty much everything I've seen him in. The film is structured into 6 chapters that are told in non-chronological order. The order in the film is 3, 5, 1, 4, 2, 6. It felt like a gimmick at first, but one that was elevating a pretty basic story, until I realized how integral that structure was to this story. Before I jump into spoilers, I want to quickly summarize my experience. Chapters 3 and 5 were fine, they did their job. They got me interested in the story, but I kind of got this vibe that they thought they were being way cooler than they actually were. However, chapters 1, 4, and 2 were genuinely great. I was kind of loving the film during this section. Not only was I glued to the screen so that I could see where the story was going, but it also made those first 2 chapters better substantially. And then chapter 6 soured my experience on the movie so much that I can't even say I liked it. Alright, on to spoilers. Chapter 1 really got me into this film with its great subversion, where you figure out that Kyle Gallner was sort of role-playing. It felt like the film had something clever to say about the dangers of doing stuff like this with strangers, and I also really love this subversion because, while it got you thinking about what's really going on in the film, it doesn't ruin the greater subversion coming up. The next chapter really puts into question who the victim and who the aggressor is in this situation, but it still didn't reveal all its cards, which really made the next chapter, the second in chronological order, super satisfying. It felt like the subversions about gender roles and the viewer's bias were all done in a really smart way. But the last chapter completely fucked it up. The first problem is it's really poorly paced. Like, this monologue at the start did not work for me at all. But then the fake sexual assault aspect, like, what were they doing? I was really enjoying this character manipulating people and being on the run for survival, but this completely fucked up the subtext of the movie for me. The conversation between the 2 cops was awful. Like, are we supposed to think that the female cop is stupid for trying to help Willa Fitzgerald? Apparently, because then Gomi from Breaking Bad calls her a bitch, and it was presented as if you were supposed to laugh. Every scene in this chapter just meanders, and then the movie just kind of ends. Not in a well set up way either. I think part of why it didn't work was because we didn't know enough about the main character. I'm glad we didn't know much about her, and I didn't want a backstory or anything, but I would have liked if she was a little more defined. Maybe the first chapter could have started a little earlier on, and we could have learned more about the 2 of them without ruining the subversions. The movie was pretty much completely ruined with 2 lines of dialogue. It just felt like it had an agenda that left a really bad taste in my mouth. I still really enjoyed the start of the movie, the middle storytelling was really great, and I wouldn't be bored if I rewatched it, just re-offended. I have very mixed feelings on this movie. Strange Darling gets 2.5 stars from me. Next I saw Twisters. I also saw Twister for the first time. It was pretty dumb, but I'll stick to talking about the new one except for the occasional comparison. Twisters is a mostly competently made disaster movie with a very by-the-book sequence of events, a very paint-by-numbers romance plot, and a country music soundtrack with some really over-present auto-tune. If that sounds fun to you, knock yourself out, but this is definitely not my thing. It's a soft reboot, and if you're unfamiliar with that term, it's when Hollywood wants to make a remake of a film so they can make money off of brand recognition and don't have to write an entirely new script, but people don't like remakes, and if you call it Twister 2, people won't see it because they feel like they'll have to watch the first one beforehand. So let's just give it a new title like Twisters, The Force Awakens, Jurassic World. Tell the exact same story with basically the same beats with new characters, but it's also kind of a sequel. It's lazy and incredibly uncreative. Let's do a side-by-side. Spoilers for Twisters. Opening scene shows a tornado killing off characters to show that they're a real threat. also impacting a younger version of a major character. We cut to years later. We establish a group of tornado hunters, a protagonist who has invented technology to help stop tornadoes, and show an opposing group who's getting more attention from the townies around them. And this opposing group is hunting tornadoes for more monetary reasons. We get the first tornado encounter where the protagonist gets overcome by thoughts of previous events and is unable to complete their intended tasks. The main character then visits a family member, a single scene of cleaning rubble and helping tornado victims, a classic horror movie is projected and then destroyed by a tornado, and finally the protagonist's technology finally works to save the day. As a fan of being surprised by the movies I watch rather than bored, I like stories to be a little inventive. I hate movies that take this much from the predecessor, and yes, I'm being a little selective with these clips, but this is a lot of stuff. Familiarity sells and it's ruining art. The most these movies will do to be inventive is to swap the gender of the main character, or have a switch up in terms of the villain's morality. In this movie, you originally think Glenn Powell's character is an asshole because he acts like one and does shitty things to other characters. Then at the midpoint, Glenn Powell's all like, "You're working for evil people." And the main character, Kate, is all like, "Yeah, well, you sell t-shirts and mugs to profit off of disasters." And then he walks away, and 2 seconds later, someone who works for Glenn Powell is all like, "Hey, here's some food and water we bought with the money we got from selling t-shirts and mugs." It's so on the nose and stupid. The editing and writing here felt like an insult to my intelligence, and the rest of the movie we're supposed to think Glenn Powell is a likable character, even though he's a dick at the start. He also says in this scene that he's gonna go find someone's dog, and later he's like, "Yeah, I found the dog." I think this criticism is overused, but show, don't tell. Show these characters doing good things. Don't explain it to me in such an unnatural way. Through the movie, we learn that Kate is a super smart scientist, and then later we see her push buttons in Glenn Powell's car as if she's 6 years old. I think by this point we've established that she's intelligent enough to know that that's dangerous, don't you think? It's kind of ridiculous how often tornadoes occur. The first movie had some dumb reasons why they happen all the time, but in this movie they don't even bother doing that. The presentation of the tornado scenes is competent. The far better special effects and sound design makes them threatening and gives them more of an impact than the first film. However, I've seen almost every Marvel movie, every Star Wars movie, most of the high-grossing disaster movies in the past 10 years, so at this point I'm pretty sick of giant computer-generated disasters unless I'm emotionally invested in the characters we're supposed to be worried for. Kate is highly intelligent but conflicted by the guilt she feels. It's a very basic and overdone way to write a protagonist, and she's very one-note. Glenn Powell is the best character in the movie, and he's still pretty unlikable to me. He's full of himself, reckless, and occasionally heroic. There really isn't more to his character than that. Anthony Ramos has the least going for him. His performance is bad as well. He's really bad at delivering lines with any weight to them, which makes the more dramatic scenes really suffer. The way they wrote his arc in the movie was also very dumb. Anthony Ramos is like, "I need to turn around to save these people." And then this other guy is like, "Whose side are you on? We don't care about people." Wow, what an interesting moral quandary. This predicament has me almost as morally conflicted as Anthony Ramos in this scene. What a thought-provoking dilemma. The acting in general in the film felt like the director probably spent very little time with these actors. The camera work was mostly serviceable, but in the dramatic sequences, there's these really cheesy zooms they do every now and then. It always looked bad and was distracting. Overall, it's one of those movies you'll never think about after you watch it because it has nothing worth thinking about. It's disposable content to kill 2 hours with and forget about a week later. Literally nothing makes this film stand out other than the movie having some fireworks being inside a tornado. I'll admit that was kind of cool. I'm going to give Twisters 2.5 stars, and I hope to never see it again because it's very, very bland. Finally, we have Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. This movie is also banking off of familiarity and nostalgia, but instead of being boring and predictable, it was just kind of a mess. Michael Keaton did a good job reprising his role, Catherine O'Hara had some funny moments. I was glad we got practical sets and props instead of a CGI nightmare like most of Tim Burton's movies in recent years. I enjoyed hearing Danny Elfman's score in a movie theater, and also weirdly Sigur Rós, and that's about all I liked. So why is this movie's story a mess? There are so many plot lines, and each one is rushed and concluded in such an underwhelming way. A Beetlejuice sequel has been teased for decades now, so maybe it's just a weird amalgamation of a bunch of different scripts. Maybe there was a bunch of studio interference and the movie was severely re-edited. Whatever happened, this movie is just all over the place, and even with an overabundance of plotlines, they pretty much never intersect with one another. Winona Ryder absolutely sucks in this movie. In the first 5 minutes, she's supposed to have an emotional breakdown, and she completely fails at doing anything convincing. There are also so many lines in the movie where I could just tell in her head she was going, "I do not want to be here. I do not want to be here. I do not want to be here. Justin Trudeau is never funny at all. There's a bunch of distracting cameos. Tim Burton has been criticized for not putting people of other races in his movies, so his solution was to put a bunch of black actors in afros and have a gag where their characters on a soul train. Not soul as in ghost, but soul as in soul music. The pun is less offensive than the concept, but it's close. The presentation of the afterlife in the first movie was genuinely really clever. The disappointment in the characters when they realize the afterlife is one big DMV is hilarious, and this doesn't fit that at all. The rest of the video will pretty much be spoilers, so you can leave now if you don't want to be spoiled for Beetlejuice. Winona Ryder is a terrible protagonist. Every bad thing that happens to her, she just rolls with without protest. Justin Trudeau wants to marry me? Yeah, alright. And now Beetlejuice wants to marry me? Sure, why not? I know she has reason in the movie to make these choices, but the lack of attempt on her part to get out of it makes her character really uncompelling. The plot lines with Willem Dafoe and Beetlejuice's ex are completely underwhelming, and it just makes no sense why they're even in the movie. They're entirely pointless by the end. The plotline with Jenna Ortega and the boy she meets is painfully predictable, to a point where I was questioning if the reveal was even supposed to be surprising. Justin Trudeau being the one to say Beetlejuice 3 times was very obvious as well, and it makes Winona Ryder's character seem even more stupid than she already did. The ending was absolutely awful, sequel bait trash. It was so bad I actually couldn't believe what I was watching. What were they thinking? They incorporate some stuff from the old movie because they have to, like a choir of children singing the Banana Boat song at a funeral. What an inappropriate use of music only in service of a reference. There's a scene where the characters are possessed and have to sing and dance like the old movie, except this time it goes on for a full 5 minutes. And they also end the marriage scene with a sandworm, which is already one of my least favorite parts of the first movie, and just makes it more annoying to do it again in this one. Overall, you guys know I'm very cynical to this type of stuff. The original Beetlejuice is incredibly creative and unique, and this movie just takes ideas from that one and does them again. There isn't a single new idea that's any good. I'm giving this one 2 stars. And there you have it. I hope to make more videos like this soon. Tell me what upcoming releases you'd like to hear my opinion on. Hopefully I'll see something soon that I'll actually enjoy. All ratings and comments are much appreciated. See ya.